God, being an adult sucks.
It sucks, dude. Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And today I am joined by Donald Shults, the designer of the upcoming Freelancers being put out by Plaid Hat Games. Welcome to the show, Donald. How are you doing in anticipation of this release?
Thanks for having me. I'm, just kind of having sort of a constant low level panic attack. You know what I mean? Like,
totally.
It's that thing where if my mind thinks about it, it's anxious. So then I spend a lot of energy just trying to not think about it,
I'm surprised that you have any nerves whatsoever, because you've been kind of dipping your toes into the board game space as like a participant, not just a board game enthusiast, but you've been content creating with Board with Life back in the day. You've done all the Plaid Hat podcast stuff. I mean, you've been in the biz. So does it feel different now that you're going to have your name on a box?
Oh, of course, man. I mean, I always have the reaction of I hate everything I make. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's just my basic natural state is to sort of dislike everything I do and feel really weird about putting it in front of other people. But I still have that drive to make stuff, But with a board game, it's a little different than a YouTube series or a podcast, right? Because it's like you're asking for people's direct money and time.
I mean, people can give me direct money for this. I don't normally ask for it, but people can.
True.
I mean,
yeah, we had a Patreon on the podcast and stuff, so that tracks. I guess it's just when you put out a board game and it sucks, that means potentially somebody had 5 people over to their house and they bored them to death. Do you know what I mean? It's just really. It's a big swing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you're asking a lot of the publisher as well. Many board games now are being put out by crowdfunding, and people are putting them out under their own company, that kind of auteur, I'm Red Raven Games. I do all the artwork. I do all the music and the trailer. But when you are Donald, who is now pitching a game to presumably Colby or someone else at Plaid Hat Games, you're going, I think this is going to be a good game. And they're like, I think this is going to be a good game. And then you're doubly crossing your fingers that it's going to be successful.
Well, here's what's weird about Freelancers is Colby kind of pitched the game to me, which is backwards of how it should probably go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like any other sort of mediocre white male, though, I find my way to fail upwards through the things. But Colby was a big fan of the Dungeons and Dragons podcast I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of stuff on there where I was trying to sort of mechanize and narrativize aspects of the game that have always just sort of been there, but in an abstract level, experience points are a tangible thing in the world, stuff like that. And around that time, I was working on Forgotten Waters from an audio standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And I had written some stuff for the DLC. They hired me to do some of that. And then I had found an old prototype of a game that I had been working on a long time ago, back in the Board with Life days. And I when I was cleaning my house, and I sent a picture of it to Colby, I was like, there's this mechanism in here that I think would be pretty cool in a Crossroads game. You should put it in the next game after Forgotten Waters. Free mechanism. I'll never use it. And he, called me and was like, you should use it. And what you should do is, because he had several times approached me about you should let me do a board game based on the stuff you're doing on your podcast or whatever. And it never made sense to me.
That's something I've always admired about Colby in general is over the years, I was a listener to the Plaid Hat podcast way back in the day, old school. And I have talked to him and several Plaid Hat folks over the years. I've gotten to know Nikki, your wife, through connections at Plaid Hat as well. It does seem like Colby emphasizes working with people that he likes and likes their just kind of creative oeuvre. I think that there are some people who would say, you know, that's no way to do business, but clearly Plaid Hat has weathered the storm of this ever-changing landscape in different ways than many companies have been able to.
Well, there's certainly parts of it that are, you know, bad. But that, you know, like I've worked my whole life, you know, in the entertainment industry and stuff, bouncing from job to job based almost purely off of like nepotism and being funny at parties or something. Like very rarely has anybody ever gone like, that guy is the best audio engineer in the city. Like, let's get him or something. It's usually like, that guy's not a drag on set. I don't want to be stuck on set, or I don't want to be stuck in the studio with somebody who's a drag. And that is a talent that I think is often neglected to encourage people to develop in school and stuff, you know, like we focus so much on like the mechanics of it, but we don't do a lot of like, also like you got to kind of be pleasant to be around or whatever.
Well, I want to dive into Freelancers for sure, but I also want to get kind of like a read on your history. You know, I know you do a lot of audio engineering stuff, both within board games and outside of board games now, but where I first got to know you was with Bored with Life, and you know, it seemed like this very great production that was being done by these young cool people who should be making sitcoms pitched to NBC or something, but instead were making these like dumb meeple and camel jokes. And so like, what was the genesis of that? Was like board games just a means to an end, a subject matter to kind of get your creative output out there? Or were you hardcore game enthusiast before that, and then as you got into audio and video production or acting or whatever that crew at Moonrat was, you know, naturally said, oh, we need to make something about this?
Yeah. We were, I met those guys, and gals, on a set. They needed a sound person, and they didn't know somebody who did that professionally. And, that's a thing I was kind of dipping my toes into. And so we made an art film together, and I did sound on it, and sort of I did a lot of little gigs here and there back then when I was living in Austin. But something about that shoot, we were all living in a house together. It was shot in the middle of nowhere. And so for like a week and a half, we were all just roommates, like making this artsy fartsy movie nobody ever watched. And we really hit it off and became fast friends. And then afterwards, my buddy Chris Bryan, who was the camera person on that movie, like he and I had been talking, and we we're getting together and having game nights, you know, all the time to just keep in touch. Like all those people, we were all playing games together. And Chris was like, you know, there's these shows like The League or what was the popular World of Warcraft one at the time? Remember that?
Yeah, I do remember it. Yeah,
right?
The Guild.
You know, there's these shows on YouTube. Like that might be a bridge that like an art film that like only shows at festivals doesn't get you. You know, there might be some like very cynically, right? This is a thing we love, but also it might be a way for people to actually like see it and care about it, you know? And it was also an interesting creative experiment to try to make like a sitcom. Can I swear at all? Or
you can swear your heart out.
Well, I'm not. It's not hard, but you know, a sitcom-ass sitcom is what we would talk about. Like, what if it was like, can we do that? Like a 30-minute like, is there a world for that on YouTube? Which was very, you know, it comes with its own pros and cons, like anything else. But yeah, that's where all that came from. And you know, we were just talking. We all still talk. We were just talking the other day. Like Brittany messaged us all and was just like, I really like miss doing that. It's impossible to do it now because we all have like kids and responsibilities. That like working for free every weekend for like years was not conducive to you know, being a sane, normal, functioning member of society in other ways. But we miss it.
And during that time, did you mentioned earlier, I guess, that you had some prototype for another game. Like, were you thinking about the idea that you could be getting into the industry as far as becoming a designer, or that you could somehow plant your mark?
Yeah. You know, as a kid, I was a big Dungeons and Dragons kid. My parents played, and so I just grew up obsessed with it. And through that, tabletop role-playing games, I was constantly making them to play with my friends and stuff. And then, once we were doing Board with Life, I took several runs at making board games. But I'm a chronic. I'm a starter. I'm not a finisher. I'm good at like working on someone else's thing and like kind of relentlessly. And I'm good at starting things, but I'm terrible at finishing things. And that's something that working with other people is really good for me in that way. You know, that accountability. And so Colby kind of provided that by going like, hey, like you could actually, you know, finish this idea. I would pay you for it.
Well, then, you know, like how much free room do you have when you're making this game? You know, like you have this mechanical idea, and then Colby says, well, why don't you actually make that into the next Crossroads game? You have Crossroads game as part of the title, which, you know, is kind of an amorphous thing. There are certain things that maybe that conjures up, but you have a degree of latitude with where that can take you based off of the games that have historically come. You know, how much did Colby dictate as far as like, this is what I need this game to be, and how much was it, you know, like, run with your ideas and then pitch something to me once you have something a little more fleshed out?
I think the average person, you know, who doesn't know Colby or our process would be pretty shocked at how much free reign and freedom I had to just do whatever I wanted. I mean, we would play test the game. Joe, I love the game Forgotten Waters. I absolutely love that game. It's definitely in my top 3 favorite games. Depends on the category or what type of game night I'm having on whether I'm going to bust it out. But I really, really found that game like inspiring and exciting. And so, you know, Isaac Vega and Joe, you know, with Plaid Hat and Mr. Bistro, all those guys who worked on that, I had them as a resource. I could play this game with them, you know, and bounce it off them. But I was really envisioning it as a spiritual sequel to Forgotten Water. I really wanted to hew pretty close to that, and Colby was kind of expecting me to kind of go a little bit more Wild West with it. He was kind of like, oh, I think you could kind of be riskier with it, and we kind of landed somewhere in between in the end. But he was always kind of encouraging me, like, because so a thing that people maybe not think about, right, is like Plaid Hat was owned by a larger company for a while. And then Plaid Hat went. I'm saying a lot. I don't, because I'm not 100% sure what I'm allowed to say.
Right.
Plaid Hat went independent again. Colby bought his company back, but without some of the games that they had before.
Yeah.
And so because of that, financials were scary for Plaid Hat. There was like, you know, if Forgotten Waters didn't hit, you know, people could lose their jobs. It was some scary stuff. And so along those lines, I was kind of like, you know, you got a good thing here. Like, I'd love to just kind of build on top of it. And we ended up landing somewhere kind of in the middle. It pushes a lot of the boundaries of Forgotten Waters, but it's definitely more in line with that than, say, Dead of Winter, the original Crossroads game.
Yeah, so then let's define in your mind, as the designer of the most recent iteration, what a Crossroads game is. Because if we look at Dead of Winter, and we're just going to kind of glaze over Gen 7, it wasn't that big of a hit. Things were being figured out, you know, whatever.
I don't know
cool
her.
Concepts.
No, I'm kidding. I haven't played it.
But we compare Gen 7 to Forgotten Waters. There's not necessarily a ton of mechanical similarity in there. You could see some spiritual similarity, but there's definitely a large gulf. So what to you says, oh, this is a Crossroads game?
Yeah, for sure. The Crossroads cards from Dead of Winter were huge for me. That's another thing. I was like, I just loved it. And Forgotten Waters, it's funny because the first many times I played it, I didn't realize it was a Crossroads game. It's kind of like at the bottom of the box. Whereas like Dead of Winter, it's like Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game. Forgotten Waters is like Forgotten Waters. And then down at the bottom, it's like a Crossroads game. You know what I mean? And playing it, it didn't really jump out at me. But my perception kind of realigned working on Forgotten Waters when I worked on the DLC stuff. So for me, what a Crossroads game is at this point is a game where your character is faced with narrative decisions that are both narrative and mechanical that impact the game in a big way, that are based on the current circumstances of the game, if that makes any sense. So the game, knows you are at the gas station with the, like, to me, like the triggering of the Crossroads card in Dead of Winter is like, if the person to your left goes to the gas station, stop them and read this card out loud. And what Forgotten Waters was doing was taking that moment and like kind of like putting it inside the app, so there's not a person who has to manage it. There's not a person who, because a lot of times in Dead of Winter, people would forget to do the Crossroads card, or you'd like, one person in the group would keep like drawing them but never get one, you know what I mean? Like, and so it was so what we tried to do with Freelancers is make that process more transparent and make it a lot more clear to the people on the other end, so they don't have that feeling as much. So Freelancers takes a lot of steps to try to kind of make that player facing a lot more often, where you'll be faced with those sort of like moments, but the game will kind of like still cue you. Like, it'll ask you, like, oh, is there a dwarf here? And they happen a lot more often. And they're also like on the map. So this game uses a map, and wherever roads like intersect with like a bunch of intersections, I just made a space in the game literally called a crossroads.
Love it.
And whenever you go to a crossroads, you get a crossroads event, which hopefully helps make it more clear to people what you're experiencing. That said, I've said this before, I don't have any sway. Nobody listens to me. I tried to shoehorn Crossroads cards into this game still on top of the app as like burdens your character could collect or whatever. And the only way that it could be relieved is if the person to your left did a thing, and then you'd have an event with them and you trigger the bird. It didn't work in play testing, but I still think there's a way to get those Crossroads cards into a future Crossroads game. I still have some love for them, for those cards, those Dead of Winter cards. So don't buy Freelancers. buy some game from 10 years ago that I'm talking about.
Or buy them both. Both. I mean, you can't help but look at the artwork on this box for Freelancers and be like, well, I want that too. I mean,
thank you. So many people don't like it.
What? That's unbelievable. Like, let
me get your temperature on this.
Okay, so here's how I feel. Like the box itself has this very cartoony, I would describe it not just like Adventure Time or something, but it reminds me of, more than anything, like newspaper comic strips.
Yeah, sure.
It has this simplicity, this caricatureness about it that's really playful and lovely, but the depth of color is extremely stylistic. The flourishes in it. I mean, the box itself has these brilliant purples and reds and light blue highlights that really accentuate tone. That I think without the combination of that sort of, like deep resonance with the really lighthearted characters themselves, that neither stylistically would be as captivating. If it was too realistic as far as how the characters are drawn, then it would just be everything else that's out there,
So it's funny. That was a much deeper answer than, I expected. So thank you. That's nice to hear. Because it was funny. I art directed the game, and the artist Sam O'Malley and Alison Carl are both amazing. Sam is huge in the indie RPG world, and so to me, it was very like kind of scrappy and punk rock, kind of in that Adventure Timey way. Like it's cartoony, but it looks kind of scraggly and rowdy. If there's like a lot of like junk and trash or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when we put it out, I mean, you always like focus on like the 4 negative comments, and it's fine for people to not like it, but there's people who are just like, why does it look like it's for babies? And I'm like, it doesn't look like it's for babies. It looks like it's for me. I'm 40.
Yeah. I love the artwork, and if anyone's like, oh, it looks like it's for babies, I mean, just look at some of the most popular games that have come out in the past 10 years. This doesn't look like Root. It doesn't look like Kyle Farron's artwork, but it certainly is of the same approach as something like that, where it is extremely interesting and evocative, but at the same time is simplistic and cute caricatures. Yeah. So anyone who's like that person who's like, I don't like Wind Waker Link because this is garbage that he looks like a baby. You know what? That is one of the most artistic games in the entire series.
Yeah, all right.
Go buy a different game.
Yeah, and the stuff that Leader Games, was doing with those releases, and I mean, that was some of the stuff that gave, me the confidence to want to have cool art for the cool kids at the back of the class. You know what I mean? Yeah,
exactly. This could be doodled in a notebook and then painted over by your art teacher, like your cool art teacher who maybe also supervised the pottery class and let you make that pipe one time, and he he was fine with it, and he's like, let me take that sketch, and then he brings it back and painted it all up like this. That could be the sketch.
Cool, that's good. Well, I'm gonna send you a list of people, and you can direct message them that you disagree, and that'll make me feel better.
Well, talking of the setting and the art style here, another thing that I've always loved about Plaid Hat Games is that it seems like the designers get to bring a lot of the thematic flair to the table. I know a lot of companies will say like, oh, we like the mechanical pitch, but we're going to retheme this because dinosaurs are so in right now. Or, like we need a zombie game, or this has to fit into our pre-existing world. On the other hand, I know, like, for example, in talking with Jerry Hawthorne a few times, I know what Stuffed Fables means to him. I know what Mice and Mystics means to him and why that is intimately connected to what he wanted to convey with the game. So what is this setting, this post-apocalyptic fantasy freelancer adventure setting?
All right, I'm going to try my best to not be like ironically distant, or I'll be sincere.
I'll take whatever you got to give.
It means a lot to me, and tabletop RPGs have been a thing that have been part of my life forever. My feelings on them have changed and morphed over the years, kind of along with my own feelings about the world, right? And the game is kind of a reflection of that, right? I mean, there's obviously, whenever you're talking about fantasy, there's usually this sense that like most fantasy settings are inherently post-apocalyptic. There's this feeling of like a long time ago, there was magic we didn't understand. There's all these ruins that we can investigate. There was a better age in the past, and now there's monsters. And so trying to sort of connect that to like, the feelings and of anxieties you have being an adult and a parent in 2023, and like trying to make it kind of like funny and like okay to engage with your friends,
right.
in a narrative where you're not it's not like preachy or anything. You're kind of just a bunch of scumbags who are wandering this world doing gigs. But I don't even know if that's an answer, but that's all in there. All that texture is kind of the theme of the game. It's you are people who are left with the detritus of our world, and you're monsters essentially, and you're trying to make sense of the world that us left behind, and try to kind of exist in it. And often you're just making the same mistakes.
So I am just going to play as Ukla the Mock from Thundar the Barbarian, and it'll be perfect. That is my wish fulfillment. Well, this game, what it strikes to me more than certainly more than Dead of Winters, more than Forgotten Waters, it does seem to have much more of an RPG light bent to it. And you've mentioned RPG several times at this point. And what we know, or what I know of the game so far, is that there are even like character creations. You pick like race and class and combine those, right? Tell me a little bit more about some of the mechanical underpinnings that make this game distinct.
Yeah, the hope was to make some. I have known people my whole life. Like during COVID, I was running a game, an open table game of old school Essentials, which is like 1980s Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, but like put together in a way that makes sense. I was running for a game of like a group of like 31 people, and it was like open tables, like anybody who wants tonight, I feel like playing, you can just jump on and we'll figure it out or whatever. And I've always like loved bringing people into this because there's nobody who's more fun to play with than people who haven't done it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
That sense of discovery of like somebody going like, wait, I can just do that. I can just do whatever I want. But there's such a barrier, perceived barrier at least, if not a real barrier, for people to introduce themselves or their friends to that if they don't have some person there who's been a dork about it and is like, all right, what are we looking for? What do you want on your menu tonight? You know what I mean? Like, and so Freelancers, from a board game standpoint, is trying to be a hybrid. Like looking at Forgotten Waters, I saw a lot of space in there where I was like, there's a lot of room to hybridize those experiences of like a party game and a board game and an RPG and finding that lane. So like in Freelancers, for example, there's a lot of occasions where the game is prompting you to like, you can almost always avoid it, but like there's like times where it's like prompting you to role play like as your character. Like what would you do? Like there's times where it's like, do you want to roll or would you rather like describe what your character would do? And then there's like mechanical ways where people can vote and stuff to like handle the outcomes of these events in ways that hopefully blur those lines so much that it makes people feel a lot more comfortable about it. The idea is to condense the feeling of like playing a whole RPG campaign in like a single setting, you know, with people. It has a beginning, a middle, and end, has multiple dungeons. You visit lots of locations, you beat the big bad, and then you move on to a different thing, you know.
As a condensed game, you know, like Forgotten Waters, that's a chonker as far as playing an entire scenario to start to finish.
Yeah.
It's maybe not, you know, like playing a campaign of Gloomhaven or something.
Right.
But nonetheless, you know, like that can take multiple sessions. I was finding usually with my play group at the time that I last played it, we were doing maybe like 2 to 3 individual sessions per scenario of Forgotten Waters. What's the playtime like in this? Are you going to do one and done 90 minutes, you've completed it? Or are you breaking it up into several sessions and you'll culminate to the finale of the story after 3 or 4 sessions?
You can save your game anytime and pick it up again later. The playtime is definitely shorter overall than Forgotten Waters. The experience is kind of more streamlined. A big design goal I had was to be like, because honestly, a lot of the time for me, whenever I'm playing a game that allows me to put it away, my friends will all be so deferential to one another's time. It just is like guaranteeing you never play the game away. You know what I mean? Like whenever a game goes, do you want to put it away? So it's like, I mean, I'm okay with that if you are. Well, it is getting late. I don't want to pressure you into it or whatever.
God, being an adult sucks.
It sucks, dude. Yeah. And so trying to streamline the experience. So for example, to make it a little bit more literal, for example, in Forgotten Waters, every time you move on the thing, you're usually opening up a page and doing like a round of like this worker placement stuff, and that connects to narrative stuff or whatever. That's only like the big moments in Freelancers. Most of the time, you're doing more theater of the mind kind of stuff where you're moving across this map, kind of Indiana Jones style, point to point, and making decisions with each other. And stuff like that hopefully condenses the experience into, roughly speaking, you have a lot of agency, so it can really vary, but roughly speaking, half the time of a Forgotten Waters of adventure. It's hard for me to gauge too when I play, because we can play very fast.
Yeah, that's very true. Sometimes I think people are not necessarily as honest about that, or at least self-reflective.
We have some awesome playtesters, and they're turning in their times, and thankfully it's within the range that we expected. But I can certainly play most of them in 90 minutes.
Cool.
But it's probably going to be closer to 2 hours to maybe 3 for some of the longer ones. They're different lengths, the different adventures. But
and how emergent is it? Like, am I going to play a prescribed adventure that's going to be, like a more or less similar experience? Maybe I'll add different characters, maybe different crossroad moments will come up.
Sure.
But, am I going to overall have the same narrative arc if I replay that prescribed adventure?
Right.
Or is it more a prompt, and then that's going to just diverge wildly from another time playing that same prompt?
Right. So that was another design goal of the game, with looking at Forgotten Waters. A lot of people play an adventure in Forgotten Waters and then go, we saw reviews where people go, I wonder if you could replay it. Mm-hmm. I really liked it. I wonder what would happen. And then another person, I think it was like a Dice Tower had like a panel review maybe, and one person was like, oh no, I did replay it, and you hear different things. And I was like, oh, and I thought like, oh, we should make sure, again, make that more player facing, where people kind of know, oh, I could do that differently next time. Right, and that would change the story. That said, it comes with 5 stories, and each one has it's beat to beat moments, but you can change those moments. The overarching narrative, it's not so much like you could just completely let's not go slay the dragon, let's actually go open a bed and breakfast in Utah. You can't have that much of the sort of Dungeons and Dragons experience where people just go I'm just gonna go do what I want to do. But yeah, it's a set storyline in the plot beats, but they have multiple endings, multiple routes. You've got a map in front of you, so usually visually you can see there's different stuff we could have done if we had gone left at that fork in the road. So I'm hoping people find all the fun content easier, if that makes sense, if they have that desire to explore them multiple times.
Oh, I'm going to plumb the depths. Don't worry.
I hope so, because it's a lot of writing and a lot of audio. We did a count the other day, roughly, and the game so far has 160,000 words in the document that Bistro and I have written. And that's all we'll have audio too, which makes it about 3 times the size of Forgotten Waters. In terms of narrative branches and stuff.
My hope is that I'm going to be able to use this role playing as the narrative fulfillment of Winds of Winter. So,
perfect.
This will just take the place of that. Give George a little bit of time to focus on, I don't know, wild cards or whatever else.
I wish I'd have thought of that. I should just do that. We should just make a game. It'd be worth it. You'd get sued, but it'd be worth. There's no bad PR or whatever. I don't know if that's true or not, but something, if you just feel this is Winds of Winter, it's official. The official ending of the
I love
it. The next 3 books, you didn't even know there's 3, huh? Yeah, they're all in this box. We made it as a game. You can play it.
So, one thing that I was surprised by when I looked at this game, when I first, started to see some rumblings on it, is I was like, it's 2023. And now Donald in front of me is saying words like streamlined and saying things like, we're adults and commitments and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And this says 3 to 7 players on the box, 3 to 7. And I, in some ways, admire the commitment to the 3, because it feels like every game has to be designed for 2-player for market reasons, and 1 player, certainly people are going to solo. On the other hand, I do most of my gaming these days as an adult with a partner, with a kid.
Yeah.
As the tired hours after the kid goes to bed, playing one-on-one with that person.
Yeah.
And now I got to get that 3rd. And I know that that's what was on the box in previous games as well, and there were variants. But what was the the commitment to the 3 on this?
Yeah, so in modern sort of terms, we're trying to honor thruples. There's not enough. There's so many 2-player games,
yes.
but people who are in thruples, they don't have anything
exactly
thrown directly at them. People who are in cults where they have 6 or 7 spouses, there just needs to be more of that. And then, of course, Joe, who was the kind of the mastermind behind Forgotten Waters, he made a solo. He designed a solo and 2-player variant that is available for freelancers if you want to. But Plaid Hat across the board, I can't speak for every game that we've published, but I'll say for me philosophically, like I have bought games before that's player count was like, oh, this will support like 3 players and I want to play with and then I open the game and it has like a variant. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I really wish you had not put on the box that it was for this, when that's like, I'm going to have to add extra weird rules and stuff. So you can definitely play solo and 2-player freelancers. And that is how I'm playtesting it a lot these days as we are sprinting towards the finish line. Because the game is like done physically, because we have an app, unfortunately.
Iteration nonstop.
Forever. I could drive myself crazy. As somebody who has trouble finishing things, that's a digital product is the worst possible.
Listen to Mr. Activision Blizzard here. I'm going to expect a day 1 patch,
there will be day 1 patches. There will be all sorts of loot boxes. If you have a gambling addiction, I would steer clear, because we are going to eat your wallet, baby. But no, we have that, and it's a thing that is more and more common because people are just more and more busy. It's kind of interesting, right? Because there's like that era of like Catan and Ticket to Ride, and those of us of a certain age. That's what's like kind of swooped a big chunk of people into this hobby. And then over time, you get together with your friends less, staying up till 4 a.m. becomes less of a thing, and you still want to play games. And so we try to honor that, but it just has some extra rules. And so we didn't want to put it on the box.
Philosophically, I think it's important that even if they are not the most popular games that are being made right now, that there are still games designed that would require a certain number of players for the design, if that makes sense. Like if everything is trying to be tightly accommodating to players, and that is, it has to be just as good at 2 players as it is at 5 players, then you're going to have a lot less diversity in the games.
To Joe's credit, so Joe Arthur Ellis designed the solo and 2-player variant, and I love it. And to his credit, it works way better than I would have expected it could have. But there is an element of this game that is very party game-y. Yeah. And so like when I was talking about like, there's moments where it's like, hey, do you want to like actually talk to this guy? Like, would you think you could persuade him better with your own words than the dice could do for you right now? That option as a solo player just makes you a crazy person, unfortunately.
But in some ways, I feel like that's in the spirit of the game too. You're just having an argument with yourself. I could see a freelancer roaming the wastes of some forgotten city, and they're having an argument with themselves, muttering
to themselves. Yeah, for sure. That's in theme.
Well, I actually haven't spent a lot of time talking about, individual nuts and bolts of playing this game, because it's just such a pleasure talking with you in general. And that's kind of more what this podcast is about anyway. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, like, what was that original mechanical idea? The thing that you're like, yo, Colby, check this out. And he's like, writes it on a whiteboard and puts a line through an S to make a dollar sign.
Right. Yeah. Like the aliens pitch. Right. Yeah. So quick aside, because this is one of my favorite stupid inside jokes with my friends. So like anybody who doesn't know, famously, James Cameron, when he pitched Aliens, like supposedly wrote, like he just walked into a room and wrote alien on a whiteboard and then put an S next to it and then turned that into a dollar sign or whatever. That's and our former Board with Life person I've made things with, Casey Bartow, always had this stupid short film he wanted to make, which was like a documentary about that moment with like a bunch of talking heads or whatever of these old executives that were in the room. But the true story is that he wrote alien on the board. He made an S. He turned it into a $sign. And then he just said ghost basketball. And then like stood back and they're like, love the aliens thing. What was that last bit? He's like, I got meetings all over town. No more questions or whatever. I don't know. It's stupid.
It's wonderful though. It's so weird.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, the original idea, with the funniest part of it, I'll cut to the ending, which is that I cut it from the game. My own volition. I ended up
That's amazing.
it. But the idea was you have like the game was this game where you had locations that were represented by, let's say, like tarot-sized cards. And then you would have a deck of cards on top that were smaller that fit in. So let's say it says like cave, right? And then you're exploring the cave and you flip over a card and it'd be like cave goblin because the two cards are like nested against each other. And then like those two cards would meet up, creating like stats that would lead to entries in like an app or something like that. And so I kept like messing with this idea of like every page in the book, you're going to randomly draw a card and place it on the page. And that's going to dynamically create a side quest for that page that will be completely unique to your game, because like the numerical chance that you're ever going to get this twice would be like impossible. And it's like this extra space on the thing. But then it's like, how much audio and writing
right.
are you actually going to do? And so then it turned into this weird game of like, how do I cheat this system to where I don't have to do all this work? And then eventually we found other ways to take that idea and make it more quality than quantity, which is what I was headed toward at that point in playtesting, was a lot of quantity.
I'm thankful for the quality over quantity, but you know, there's always a chance that you could have just put a thin layer over like an AI input, and you know, like you're pretending you wrote it all, but really it's just a link.
ChatGPT does it. I think about that a lot. I don't want to live in a world where I'm consuming art that wasn't made by other humans, just philosophically.
Right.
But I know I am going to live in a world where I'm consuming art that wasn't made by other humans, and I'm not going to know it. It keeps me up at night. But maybe I should just be the guy to do it.
It's kind of yeah, exactly. You know what? Can't beat them, join them. You know, just capitalize on that. There's your apocalyptic wasteland. That's what started it all. You know, that's a good question. Thematically, do you know what caused this apocalypse?
I do.
Okay. Is that revealed anywhere?
It's in my head canon. It's never said in the game.
I love it. I love it.
The characters don't know.
Of course. Of course they don't know.
It's pretty funny because they talk about the ancients a lot and they talk about humans a lot. And the ancients were like these mysterious people who built this crazy stuff, and they made amazing things we still don't understand. And then they somehow killed themselves. It doesn't make any sense, but like they wiped themselves out. And then humans are scary, selfish, idiot creatures that sort of live in the shadows that like you tell kids as like a fairy tale sort of bedtime story to, keep them from getting up in the middle of the night. Like the two concepts are not necessarily connected one-to-one in the world of the game.
Well, in the Plaid Hat cinematic universe, it's not too hard to make like a jump from Aftermath to this. You know,
That's
you could
true.
say those
That's
gerbils
true.
with swords, you know, that was just like 100 years after the apocalypse, and now this is thousands.
This is thousands.
Yeah,
For sure. In my mind, and directly, players will definitely not miss out on this if they've played both games. It is somewhere in the timeline of Forgotten Waters, but not in a literal sense. But there are certainly characters that appear in both games. I'll put it that way.
I love it. There's a couple really notable moments in Forgotten Waters that my wife and I and a couple of friends will still memeify to each other, you know, put into a group text or something. It's just too good of moments.
Yeah. That's like the best stuff games can do, I think, now, is create inside jokes and ways to sort of deepen your experience with your friends. You know, like that's the hope. That's the dream, is that people will play Freelancers and like, you know, long after they don't care about the game anymore, they'll have like an inside joke or, you know, some sort of thing that will be a thing that they can text each other. That's my dream as a game designer, is to create that, to facilitate that.
That's what it's all about. Well, Donald, with this coming out at Gen Con 2023, your name can be said in the same breath as Uwe Rosenberg and Klaus Tuber, Reinhard Knizia, you know, like all of those are right there. What's next on the game creation horizon? Do you have plans? Are you just going to ride out this for a little while? Do you have anything that you can hint at?
I am going to kill Martin Wallace. No, no, I don't know. Yeah, I've been kicking around a few game ideas, but I've been, you know, it's a thing where I'm like not really allowed to work on them. Like Colby has been very good about letting me explore whatever I want within Freelancers. But like,
are you safe? Are you in Colby's cage right now? Like,
finish the damn game. I'll come into the office and go, I got this cool idea, man. It's this game. It's called Into the Light. And you're like dead and you're in hell. And you're like, how do I get out? And he's like, finish Freelancers and then tell me about your stupid idea. But no, like in the near term, some of me and the Board with Life peeps have been talking about doing RPG podcasts just for fun, bringing that back. We did that for a while. Just working on Freelancers has made me sort of, you know, think like, I should do that again with my friends. It won't be anything high production value or anything anybody should care about, but that's kind of something I'm excited about. And then, yeah, no serious board games in the. Well, actually,
let's back that up.
This is a good story. I had an idea for a game that I was pretty seriously working on in the background. I was calling it Billionaires on Mars. I was pretty excited about it. It was inspired by Chinatown, and which is the game I love. I was like, it's a negotiation game.
I thought you were talking about the movie, and suddenly I was like, how much incest is in this?
No, no, it's a you know, I was like, it's a negotiation game, and it's all about like these convoluted and I had all these ideas. And then Nikki came back from Origins just recently and had played a game. She was like, there's a game I played that you would love. And she described it to me, and it was just like a better version of Billionaires on Mars. And I was like, damn. Well, what is this new? I want to play this new game. And I looked it up, and I believe it was, we figured out what it was, because let me pull it up real quick, because it's a funny punchline if I have to search for it.
That's what makes all audio recording the best, right? Is when you can hear
just a dramatic pause before the joke. I was like, oh man, my genius idea. Somebody beat me to it. And the game was, it turns out, High Society by Reinhard Knizia, which came out in 1995. He beat me to the punch when I was in 5th grade.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So no, I should quit.
Yeah. Okay.
Freelancers is my first and last game.
Well, I certainly am excited to check it out. Like I said, it's absolutely gorgeous looking at it, looking at the components. I've loved a lot of what Plaid Hat has done in the past. I'm a huge fan of both Dead of Winter and Forgotten Waters, and this looks like an exciting new chapter, especially for someone who... I have played many RPGs, but I'm more of the board game guy. But I've always wanted to scratch that. I've always wanted to really deeply immerse myself in that, but in a board game structured way. So this looks perfect for me.
Well, cool. I'm really proud of it. You know, joking aside, I hope people check it out.
And I'm certain they will at Gen Con 2023.
Yeah.
All right, Donald, thanks for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.